Okay, so let's begin with a look at the finished project. And you can see we have 6 groups, and each group holds all the elements that it needs to mask out and reveal what is happening in the group beneath it and the layers beneath it. And that's how we're going to get these effects. We're going to use a different method for each group, some shapes, some lines, using the ink shape style brush for the Bezier tool, a little bit of cloning also, and just some fading out. So before we start the project, let me give you the RGB settings. So if you want, you can create some swatches and follow using the same colors that I'm using. Okay, so into the project, and so you can see I've started the project with just 2 groups. I'm calling them, of course, first, second, etc. In the first group there is a white color solid. In the group under it there is a blue color solid and our text. So let me turn off the white solid so we can see that group under it. The text here is aligned to the center. The anchor point is at the center of the text, and the size is 200. The font size is 200, and the font I'm using here is Avener. So to build the first mask transition, let's add a new group. I'm going to call this group Ink Splash, and I'll drag that into the first group. So now just grab my Bezier tool, and around the middle of the text I'm going to just click twice to leave one point on the canvas. Now I will come to properties, come to the inspector and the shape, choose shape style. We want liquid ink bleed 01 heavy, and I'm going to set the width of this stroke to 600. So as you see, if we play, that's given us a splash of ink that we're going to use for our mask. Okay, so keep the playhead around where you can see the ink, and in the inspector I'm just going to select that point there and rename it as middle so that we can find it easy enough later on, because we're going to use that one again. And I'm going to Command D to make 2 copies, and I'll name them left and right. So I'll grab the left one, and in properties I'm just going to move the X axis over, and I'll grab the right one and I'll move it over to the other side, to the right hand side. And with the right one I'm just going to turn it around a bit, and I'll grab the left and I'll do the same, turn it around a bit. There are ways to adjust the brush settings so that the splashes come out in a unique and different way, but we won't go into that now. So what we want to do now is grab the first group, right click and choose add image mask, and drag in the ink splash group that we just made as the source, and turn back on the white color solid that we turned off before, and set the blend mode to subtract. Just going to move the right bleed up and in a little bit more. Okay, that'll do. What we want now, we want so the ink splash has revealed the blue color solid below. Now we want all of that blue color solid to be revealed. And what we're going to do is select the white color solid in group 1, bring your playhead to 2 seconds, and with the keyboard hit O to trim the out point. Then go to behaviors, basic motion, add a fade in, fade out. Of course 0 frames for fade in, and we want 20 frames for fade out. Now we want to stagger the ink splashes a little bit. So I'm going to bring my playhead to 3 frames. 3, 4 or 5 frames is cool. Let's try 3. And I'm going to select the left splash, and I'm going to use Shift left bracket to move the start point of that ink splash there. And I'll bring my playhead forward another 3 frames to 6 frames, and I'll select the right splash and Shift left bracket to move that one start point there. So now we have a staggered effect. That'll do. So that is the first effect finished. Okay, so now we want to bring our playhead to forward by 5 frames. As the next mask, transition mask, is going to kick in about here. So you can close the first group, add a new group, we'll call this group third. And I'm going to command left bracket to bring them under the other groups. And the first thing we're going to do is duplicate from the second group above, duplicate the color solid and drag it in, and duplicate the text and drag it into the third group. I'm going to grab the color solid and change the color to white, and I will grab that text. The first thing I'm going to do is change the word itself in the inspector to shapes, and then I'm going to change the color to the blue. I'll just turn off the blue color solid above to make sure. Yep. Okay, so now we want to add our shape element. That will be our mask. So select the second group. Just going to reduce the canvas area there. Select the second group. Grab your line tool. And oh, by the way, if your rulers are not showing, you can come to View, Show Rulers to turn them on. So with your line tool selected at around about the 0 point there, I'm just going to shift and draw my line. So I've got a straight line. And in the inspector, I'm going to turn off the start and end cap. I'm going to set the width to 0 and set a keyframe. And make sure your playhead's at 2 seconds and 5 frames. So playhead's at 2 seconds 5 frames. We've got the width set to 0 and we set a keyframe here. So now I'm going to move the playhead forward by 10 frames and I'm going to increase that width to about 2000, I think. Okay, so now I'm going to select the second group, right click, add image mask, and drag the line, and there is the source, and set that mask to subtract. Okay, so let's carry on with the next group. Add a new group. Going to call this group fourth and set the group under the other groups. Grab the color solid from the group above, duplicate it and drag it in, and grab the text from the group above, duplicate that, drag it in. Make sure your text is in the layer above the color solid in the new group. First, I'm going to grab that text and change the word to "and" in lowercase and change the text color to white. And the color solid, we're going to change that color to the violet. Okay, so we want our playhead now at 2 seconds 20 frames. Select the third group, grab your circle tool and holding shift and option, drag a circle into the group, come to the properties and reset the X and Y values, and hit I on the keyboard to trim the start of the shape to that point. In the inspector, in properties, set a keyframe and drop the scale down to 0. Now bring the playhead forward by 10 frames. So now our playhead's sitting at 3 seconds, and increase the scale of that circle to about 360. Okay, so select the third group, right click, make a clone, sorry, not a clone layer. Third group, right click, add image mask, drag the circle in, and set that mask blend mode to subtract. Okay, so let's carry on now with the next step. I'm going to add a new group. Call this group fifth and set this group below all the other groups. And I'll duplicate the solid and the text from the group above and drag them in. The color solid, we're going to color this in the pink, the magenta. And the text, we're going to keep the color as white. We're going to change the word to ink in all capital letters. Okay, now we want to come back to the first group we did. Open the ink splash group, select the middle splash that we made, Command D to duplicate, and drag that copy into the fourth group. Make sure your playhead is set at 3 seconds. Make sure that copy of the ink splash we just put into the fourth group is still selected, and use keyboard shift left bracket to move the start of the Inpoint to 3 seconds. So now we should have an ink splash coming in over the end. Okay, so we want to right click the fourth group, add image mask, and drop our ink splash copy in there, and set that to subtract. Okay, now what we want to happen is we want the ink splash itself to expand and then contract. So bring your playhead to 4 seconds 10 frames, select the ink splash, just going to rename that to fourth group splash. So have that selected, playhead at 4 seconds 10 frames, keyboard O to trim to the timeline. Now right click that splash and select make clone layer. Okay, make sure your clone layer is selected and use keyboard left bracket to bring the endpoint of the clone layer to 4 seconds 10 frames. So now the clone is going to start where the original finishes, and in the with clone layer selected, come to the properties in the inspector, where you see, if you do not see the timing options, then click where it says show and it'll open up the options, and we want to choose reverse. So now we should have the ink splat, expand and contract. Okay, that's good. Let's select the fourth group, right click, add image mask, and drop the clone layer in there as the source, and choose subtract again for the blend mode. Okay, good. Now when, okay, also we want this ink splash to contract a bit faster than it expands. So come into the, make sure clone layer is selected, come into the properties, to that timing section, and choose 150% for the speed. Good. Now when the ink contracts, we want it to reveal a different word. So first we have the word and, then we see the ink splash revealing ink below. As it contracts, we want the new word to say make. So let's come into the fourth group, into the fourth group, select that word and at about 4 seconds 20 frames, hit O on the keyboard to trim it out so that it stops there. Then duplicate, Command D, and shift left bracket to bring the new word to start where the old word finishes, and we're going to come into the inspector and change the word and to make in all capital letters. So then what we want to do is we need to increase the scale of that ink splash. So grab it in the fourth group, increase the width to about 800, should do it. Okay, so now we want our playhead at 5 seconds 15 frames. Select the fourth group. We're going to add a third mask to this fourth group. So make sure it's selected. I'm just going to decrease the canvas size a bit. I'm going to select my line tool and draw a line from top left to bottom right. And in the inspector, with that shape selected, I'm going to set the width to 0 and set a keyframe. And I'll bring the playhead forward 10 frames to 5 seconds 25 and increase the width to about 1915. Yep. Okay, now I'm going to bring the playhead back to where I can see that line, and I'm going to Command D to duplicate it and use the handle to rotate it so it faces the other way. So now we have a cross formed. Okay, in the layers panel I'm going to shift select so that both lines are selected, right click and create a group. I'm going to call this group cross, and I'm going to select the fourth group, right click, add another image mask and drag in cross as the source and select subtract. Okay, so now when the cross reveals the color solid in the fifth group below, we want that word ink to say something else. So come back to about 5 seconds 15, come down to the fifth group, grab that word ink and keyboard O to trim its out point. Then right click and duplicate and shift left bracket to bring the duplicate word to start at 5 seconds 15 frames, and we're going to change this word to easy. Okay, so come forward until about 5 seconds 16 frames. We're going to grab that word easy that we just made and reposition it, rotate it so that it fits within the horizontal there. It doesn't need to be perfect, you can tweak it later. Alright, so we have got just one last mask transition to make now. So we want our playhead to (5 seconds 25 frames). And I'm going to select the fifth group. No, I'm not. First thing I'm going to do is add a new group. Just going to close all these other groups. Okay, I'm going to add a new group and I'm going to call this group Final. And drop that group below all the others. And I'm going to copy the color solid from the group above and drag it in. I'm going to change the color to white. I'm going to copy the easy text, duplicate that and drag it in. I'm going to change the color of this text to the pink, the magenta, and I'm going to change the word to transitions. Now with the fifth group selected, I'm just going to turn off that group so I can see the final group below. Just make sure that color solid is colored to white. If I turn off the fifth group, there we have the final text waiting to be revealed. So what we're going to do this time is a long ink bleed and then to fade. So with the playhead at 5 seconds 25 frames, select the fifth group, grab your line tool and draw a line from bottom left to top right. Just redo that. Okay, make sure the new shape is selected. Just going to call this a long bleed source. Make sure the new shape is selected and hit I on the keyboard to trim the shape to 5 seconds 25 frames. Come to the inspector in shape and choose shape style. Liquid ink bleed 01 heavy. Okay. Let's increase the width. To about 110. So this shape is going to write on. Let's grab the fifth group, right click, add image mask and add the source and set that to subtract. Okay, the keyframes for that shape all the way back here, so you want to find them in the timeline. You find long bleed source, the keyframes are sitting there. Shift click to select both keyframes and drag them forward to five seconds 25 frames. Sorry, that's one of the byproducts of using shift left bracket. I moved the start point, but I didn't move the keyframes along with it. So now that line will write on, and what we want to do is pull back the last keyframe there to 6 seconds 25 frames, which will make the line write on. Just make sure you have got only one of the keyframes selected, so I'll click out and click back in. Drag that last keyframe point back to 6 seconds 25 frames. So now it's going to write in over 1 second. And I might even adjust that width a bit more. to 125. Okay, so the very last thing we want to do is have the color solid from the fifth group fade out. So bring the playhead to about 8 seconds. Select the color solid from the fifth group, keyboard O to trim it out, add the behavior, fade in, fade out. No frames for fade in, about 40 frames for fade out. And we are done. So there you are, some simple, easy transitions that you can make with masks that don't require any replicators. I hope that's useful for you with your projects. Thanks for watching.